So, of course, I want to start by saying thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Cody Armstrong, and today we're talking about the latest additions to Onshape. So, what's new in Onshape? Now, as I always say with these webinars, I really encourage you to ask any questions that you'd like. There's a questions dialog, and then go to webinar control panel. Feel free to ask any question, and I'll do my best to stop and address the questions from time to time as we go through the webinar. So again, what's new in Onshape? We're really going to focus on just the most recent update, just what's happened in just the last few weeks. And the last update was really focused on drawings. So all the improvements we're going to discuss here today are surrounding drawings and things that you can do just to improve day-to-day life in drawings. So let's dig into it. Now, there are always a few things I like to mention about Onshape in general before we get into the topic of the day. And the first thing I always like to mention is, of course, our mission statement with Onshape, and that is getting everyone working together with CAD on any device, anywhere. This includes mobile devices, iPhone, iPad, Android phone or tablet, but it also includes any computer, Windows, Mac, Linux, even Chromebooks. You have accessibility to that CAD data from anywhere. Now, the other element of this is working collaboratively, working together. In Onshape, you can work together on the same model in real time. That's something that no other CAD system can do. It allows you to always be up to date and aware of the latest status of your design. So again, our goal with Onshape, everyone working together with CAD on any device, anywhere. Now, the other thing I always like to mention is, of course, Onshape is professional 3D CAD, and generally when people think of professional 3D CAD, they think of parts, assemblies, and drawings. But Onshape has a lot of additional things that you don't get in many traditional professional 3D CAD systems. One of the common examples, very much tied into what we're talking about here today, is the frequent updates. So with Onshape, roughly every 3 weeks, you get new functionality being added. So it's unlike any other CAD system in that sense. You're constantly being pushed out new updates. You don't have to download anything. You don't have to install anything. You log in and new features are there. It also allows us to progress at a very rapid rate. We have the ability to constantly evolve and make small changes and even fix bugs on the fly rather than hot fixes, downloads, installs, very slow, cumbersome workflow. So rather than one update a year, you get roughly 14 a year with Onshape. And the neat thing is, again, you don't have to do anything. So frequent updates. The other thing I always like to mention is in many other CAD systems, you have to have some kind of a data management system, PDM system, to manage your files and manage revisions in the file. In Onshape, this is a built-in function. We don't have files, of course, our architecture is a bit different, but the ability to capture versions and manage the properties associated with the versions, all of that stuff is built into the core functionality of Onshape. It's not something that you have to purchase separately, something you have to manage separately. So Onshape comes with built-in version control. It's not an afterthought, it's part of the core functionality of Onshape. Now, the next thing I want to mention is if you've come from some other CAD system, if you're coming from a SolidWorks, an Inventor, Creo, CATIA, or you just have a big library of CAD files, chances are we can work with those files. We can import and export a lot of common CAD formats. The neutral formats, step IGES Parasolid, of course, but then we get into native formats, SolidWorks, Inventor, Creo, CATIA. There's a long list of formats that we support for both import and export. And it means that Onshape works really well alongside other CAD applications, maybe working with vendors or whomever it may be that needs the format in a certain file type. They can certainly export as that. And it means that we also can import and work with all that data that you've built up over the years. So read and write common CAD formats means that Onshape works well alongside other CAD applications and it works well with that library of data that you have. The next thing I want to mention is entirely new methods of collaboration. With Onshape, you can collaborate with others in real time on the same model. And that's not something that no other CAD system gives you. The ability to make a change and have anyone looking at that document instantly see that change. No need for a check-in, save, copy. None of those things are necessary in Onshape because we're all working on the same set of data. Now, working collaboratively is one thing, but I think the biggest benefit that I always like to mention is you're never wondering, is this the latest version? There's no need to check in or save, so you're constantly aware that this is the latest version. There's no discrepancy there about whether or not it's been saved or checked in. And so the thing we always like to stress is just less mistakes caused by versioning of files. Right? So entirely new methods of collaboration includes real-time collaboration, but also includes little things like integrated comment capabilities that allow you to tag others with comments and features and so on. Also things like follow mode that allow you to see each other's screen in real time. The last thing I want to mention is customization with FeatureScript. FeatureScript is a programming language developed by Onshape that allows you to build a custom CAD feature. So if you're at all interested in programming and you're at all interested in saving yourself time by building your own CAD feature, definitely check out FeatureScript. It allows you to do some really impressive things very easily. And if you're at all adept in writing code, it should be a very easy transition to building your own CAD feature. The other thing I always like to mention about this is Onshape itself has released the source code for our standard features. So extrude, revolve, sweep, loft, all those standard features you can look at the source code for. And the reason that's important is you can then take that and build your own variation. So if you ever wished that the extrude command had this certain option, chances are you can build that with FeatureScript, and you can start with Onshape's extrude command, the source code for it. So really neat thing, really unique to Onshape. It allows you to build your own CAD feature and potentially save yourself a lot of time, eliminate a lot of headache, especially in those more complex shapes that you do often. All right, so these are just some things I like to mention about Onshape. Now I want to get into the update process. And the update process is very much different than any other CAD system out there. And I always like to bring this up because, again, it's one of the unique things about Onshape. It's updated roughly every 3 weeks. So it means that we're constantly adding new features. And, one update, we may focus on a certain bit of functionality, but we're always evolving at a very fast rate rather than just one monolithic, one update a year. So roughly every 3 weeks, you're going to see new features being added. The neat thing I always like to stress is the updates are automatic and they're totally transparent. So you log in and new features are there. You never have to worry about downloading or installing or dealing with version discrepancy issues between users. You never have to deal with any of those, update related headaches that you may get in other CAD systems. So updates are automatic. They're transparent. You log in and new features are there. Also, it means that everyone using Onshape's on the latest version. So you never have this issue of, hey, can you send me this as this format because I don't have that version of this CAD software, right? In traditional file-based systems, you have to make sure that everyone's on the same version constantly. Otherwise, you get all kinds of compatibility issues. Those don't exist in Onshape. Everyone using Onshape is using the same version. Now, the last thing I want to mention, of course, very much what we're talking about here today, these updates that we get roughly every 3 weeks include new functionality. So it's not just, bug fixes, hot fixes, whatever you may call it. It's actually new features, and that's what we're talking about here today. What are those new features? Now, the update that we want to discuss, there was one update, and generally if you haven't attended one of these webinars in the past, we go back 1 month and we look at the updates that happened in that month. And if we go back 1 month, in June there was one big update, June 12th, and it primarily focused on drawings. There's a lot of big improvements to drawings. There was some performance improvements as well, but again, mostly functionality, new functionality in the realm of drawings. So it happened on June 12th. I'm going to take a few improvements from this update and just cherry pick them and walk through them real quickly. It's not a lot, so we're going to get done really quickly here. So again, feel free to ask any question that you'd like in the questions dialogue. But let's dig into it. Now, the update on June 12th, the big one I would say, in my opinion at least, the biggest one in drawings is Weld Symbols. And as I mentioned before, this whole update is really surrounding drawings improvements, but the biggest one, in my opinion at least, is Weld Symbols, the ability to add Weld Symbols into your drawings. And it's a very neat way to do it, and I'm going to go through it in just a moment. You can create some rather complex Weld Symbols if you choose to. Now, the other big improvement, at least most requested improvement, is the ability to dimension hidden lines inside of your drawing. This may not necessarily be the best practice. There are a lot of users that will tell you not to do this, but there are a lot that have asked for it as well. And so now in Onshape, you can dimension to the hidden lines in your drawing. Also big in this update, especially if you're doing a lot of sheet metal, is the bin notes will automatically be inserted as you insert the flat pattern into your drawing. So that flat view of your part will now come in with bin notes in it. And again, I'll give you an example of this in a second. So I think, those top three, it definitely, if you're doing sheet metal, bin notes is going to be important to you. But Weld Symbols, is pretty common in many different areas. And then, of course, dimensioning hidden lines. That was just something that a lot of users requested. Now, the final two, drawing view priority, is useful, especially in a few certain circumstances where things are overlapping. It can make a big difference. You can move things front to back, makes them easier to select. and then drawing thumbnails. This is probably one of the biggest usability improvements, and it's just a very simple thing. In the past, when you moused over a tab that had a drawing, you didn't see a thumbnail of the drawing. Now you do. Right? And that can make a big difference, especially if you have several drawing tabs and you're not sure which one is which. The thumbnail can instantly confirm, oh, that's the drawing I'm looking for. So these are all, again, usability improvements at the drawing level, but that was really our focus with this update. So let's dig into it. Now, what I wanted to start with is weld symbols. Weld symbols are pretty straightforward. You'll find a new command in the toolbar. You'll see it here for weld symbol, right? And you have a few different options, right? Square butt joint, V butt joint, U butt joint. I'm just going to do a simple, let's say, fillet joint. I can add a reference if I choose to. I can add a value here. And it's pretty straightforward. If I want an all-around weld, I can add that as well, and then go through and define all the various settings. So if I'm looking for specific finish settings or contour settings or a reference, you can kind of build out your weld symbol. One thing that gets asked often is, how do I flip the direction of the symbol, so that's on the bottom or the top? There's a checkbox in the top left corner for that. But once you've defined what you want your weld symbol to look like, it's really just a matter of attaching it to where you want to attach it on your drawing, right? So in this case, let's attach it to the bumper here, left click, and now I've placed that weld symbol. So it's a matter of clicking weld symbol, building out your weld symbol with whatever settings that you'd like, and then left click to attach it to geometry, very similar to a note, right? Left click one final time to place it, and there we have a weld symbol. Now, there are a few limitations that we're working on improving, things like spot welds or welds at a given spacing, where you need to define the spacing and the instance, the number of spots, so to speak. But in general, that's a pretty robust weld symbol command that allows you to do a lot of different combinations of welds. So definitely give that a shot if you haven't already. If you do any kind of welded design work, that's going to be a big one. In the drawing toolbar, you'll find this new weld symbol. Question. In the illustration of the steering pump, how was the exploded view created? It was just a matter of inserting the assembly or deleting the mates and then just grabbing and pulling, using the triad manipulator. So it's just manually dragged out with the triad. Still a manual process, but again, the triad manipulator makes it pretty straightforward to grab it and set it to a given distance. All right, so the first, again, that I wanted to mention was weld symbols. You'll see the new command in the toolbar. Very straightforward to use. Keep in mind, you build your symbol first in the dialog, and then move your cursor over where you want to attach that weld symbol and left click to place it. All right, so the next one is the ability to dimension to hidden lines. And this is one that is somewhat controversial in the sense that not everyone agrees that you should do this, but it's definitely something that we get asked quite often. It's entirely up to you whether you choose to do it or not, but it's fairly straightforward. In something like this port block where I'm showing the hidden lines of the drawing view, I can, of course, attach my dimension to those hidden lines. Right? So this is something that not everyone agrees is best practice, but again, if you want to do it this way, you absolutely can. Now you can attach those dimensions as you see fit. Right? So just keep in mind, it's a very simple addition, of course. If you right-click any view, you'll see Show Hidden Lines. If you show those hidden lines, now you can dimension to them. Right? So very simple addition, but something that a lot of users have requested. Definitely a very popular one. All right, moving on. Sheet metal bin notes. Now, this is one that's going to be big for sheet metal users. Anyone out there designing sheet metal, when you insert your sheet metal flat, you want to see the bend, up, down, and the angle. And you want to see that as a bin note. It's a very commonly requested thing. So, pretty straightforward. Let's jump into a blank drawing here. The big thing, of course, is, as you're choosing your view, we've added this option. This was a few updates ago now, to add a flat pattern, and we can go in and choose the flat pattern of the bumper center. As soon as we place it, it's going to add those bin notes. Now, one thing I want to stress is the bin notes are going to come on, right next to the bin by default, and that may not be where you want to place them, of course. So a tip that I have is, it's going to insert them sitting on top of the view like this, but it's very easy to grab the point where it attaches to the bin line and drag it. So you can move this up and away if you want to. Don't grab the node, grab the actual point where it attaches and then drag it, and you'll see, that option to control where that node is. So you don't have to leave it, right on top of the view, so to speak, if that drives you nuts. Just keep in mind, grab that point, drag it, and you can clean that up. Okay, but the key thing to keep in mind, anytime you insert that flat view, it's going to come in with these notes. All right, so that is another, again, very simple one. We're going to go through this really quickly here. So again, feel free to ask any questions that you'd like. Again, just keep in mind sheet metal bin notes. You'll see them there anytime you insert that flat view. The next one I think is particularly important in two scenarios. If you ever have overlapping geometry or views overlapping with images in your drawing, this one can be a particularly useful one. The example I want to give is something like a watermark. It's oftentimes, I may want to put a watermark across my drawing that says this is a draft or this is obsolete. I want to reference something as a big label across the drawing to let the person know looking at this that this is not whatever it is. This is not released. It's not relevant because it's obsolete, and so on. So the example I like to give here is, let's say that I have a draft watermark that I wanted to insert. What I can do is I can insert an image, just choose the draft watermark here, and insert my image. And this of course, isn't new. So if you wanted to do something like a watermark before, just use something like an insert image and you can drop that in. The question then became, well, what happens if I just want to get rid of this now? I want to see it, but I still want to work on the rest of the model. And the problem here is the image kind of sits on top of everything. So it makes it difficult to select the views that you may want to select unless you're well outside that image. Image is just one example. Another might be a view on top of a view, overlapping one or the other, and you're having a hard time, selecting and moving the thing that you're trying to select. The new functionality is the send to back, bring to front functionality. It allows me to send this to the back, which means my view is much more selectable because it's no longer behind the image. So I think really practical in examples like this when you're trying to put a watermark on your drawing and you still want to be able to select the views and add dimensions to them and all the things you normally want to do in a drawing, you just don't want that image being up front and conflicting with that. Now it still allows you to select it, and if you have a locked title, locked border, you can move it to that, and then it would not be selectable. It would actually be like a part of your drawing template, but moving it to the back makes it just simpler to select the views. So if you're looking for a way to insert an image, but you find the image overlaps with something and it's hard to select what you're trying to select, try moving it to the back. And you just do a right click and you'll see send to back. And you also have, of course, the inverse of that is bring to front. So just keep in mind, it just makes it easier to grab the things that you're trying to grab. Is there a layer view where we can end these layers? No. There's no specific view that allows you to control them. One thing I would say is if you find that to be a critical thing, definitely let us know. There's a feedback tool under the help menu. Definitely give us your feedback on that. We take each user's input very seriously. So use that feedback tool and let us know if you want to be able to control individual layers. It's pretty straightforward now, back to front type thing, but it's not a true, giving you all the different layers and turning them on and off. All right, so again, the example here is of an image, but you could, of course, I could have a scenario where maybe this view is on top of this view, and I just can't select the view that I want, or it's overlapping for whatever reason, and I'm having a hard time dragging the view down. I could easily move it to the back, then grab what's behind it and move it down. So a few different examples I can give to that, but the front to back is just anytime you want to get at something that's behind something else in your drawing, that's where it's really useful. All right, so we are flying through things here. We have just one more thing to discuss, and it's a very short one, admittedly. So, but in my opinion, probably one of the biggest in this update, and it's just a small usability improvement, but it can make a big difference. It's one of those subtle things that can make a huge difference in your workflow, especially when you're doing a lot of multiple drawings. And the reason I say that is if you have more than one drawing tab, you may not know which drawing is which, right? Unless you rename them and so on. And in the past, if you moused over a tab, you would see the preview, but you would only see the preview for parts and assemblies, right? You wouldn't see a preview for your drawings, and now you do. So it's not an option or setting or something that you have to adjust. It's really just one of those things that's now on. It works. So this is a simple usability improvement, but we've gotten a lot of great feedback on it. It's something that our users have requested a lot, and it's one of those small things that can make a big deal when you spend a lot of time in a drawing, especially a document with multiple drawings. Right? Finding the right one, especially when you have a lot, isn't always the easiest thing. And especially if you don't necessarily have very descriptive names, or maybe you use part numbers for names, and it's not easy to see, what is this drawing of? Mouse over it, and I can see the preview of it. So that is the last thing that I wanted to discuss here today. These are just the big improvements that we added as of June 12th, 2017. Keep in mind, we're about 3 weeks out now, so we are certainly planning on an update very soon, so keep an eye out. We are, of course, always working on new features, but we're working on something very soon, hopefully. But again, the June 12th update, really a focus on drawings, trying to improve the drawing experience, add that needed functionality for those doing sheet metal parts or those doing welded parts, and little usability improvements. The drawing view priorities, drawing thumbnails, those all can make a big difference when you spend a lot of time in your drawings. So that's what I had planned. I'm going to stick around and answer any questions that you have, so feel free to ask any questions in the questions dialog there in the GoToWebinar control panel. I will make sure to stick around and answer all the questions. But that's what I had. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.